Good morning those who are in Singapore and the region, and good evening all of those who are in Latin America. I think we have many actually joining from Latin America. And let's get started now to this webinar about opportunities in the Southeast Asia in the fruit sector. So very important for the Latin American Chamber to host this, because many of the Latin American countries are exporters of fruits in different formats. And very glad to have with us Mr. Tim Hill, a great collaborator to the Chamber, and thank you to GlobalData for this opportunity. And just a short introduction about Tim. So Tim he is the key account director of Southeast Asia of GlobalData. And in his work in GlobalData, Tim provides economic forecasts, consumer insights, channel assessment, and business trends to the food and beverage companies looking to expand their business and the footprint in the Asia Pacific region. Tim has worked in the B2B research and media in Asia since 1992, with many organizations such as the Economist Intelligence Unit, Ipsos Business Consulting, and EcoBusiness. And recent studies and publication include the rise of food delivery in the Asian region, single-use plastic and food packing, regional transitions to a low-carbon economy, the Asian Economic Community, and Asians' consensus on corporate social issues. He is very seen in many of the big trade shows like Food Hotel Asia as one of the main and top speakers, and we are very happy to have Tim with us. Tim, now the time is yours. Please share with us the information. Just for the practicalities, please post your questions in the Q&A box. You will see them there and we will answer at the end of this webinar. And this webinar is recorded and we will be posting it in our LinkedIn social media. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tim.
Great, thanks very much, Angela, and thank you to the Latin American Chamber of Commerce for inviting me back to speak to you all. Welcome everybody, particularly if you're on a slightly unusual time zone. Apologies for that. I'm going to be speaking for about 30 minutes, and I think we've got time for Q&A after that. Let me just crack on into the presentation. Hopefully everyone can see the screen, opportunities in the Southeast Asia fruit sector. So we're going to be looking at the market growth forecast and brand share, fruit purchasing habits, Southeast Asian food service market trends, health benefit perceptions, fruit flavor preferences and drinks, and reactions to sustainability and social causes, looking at it through the consumer retail as well as through the food service sectors, looking at these are the flags of the Southeast Asian countries. I'm going to be saying Southeast Asia and ASEAN interchangeably, and going to be looking at it by to an extent also by gender and also by generation as well. And what we're going to discover is which countries are the most favorable towards foreign brands, countries got the biggest growth forecast, who's buying the most fruit, who's the most health conscious. How do ASEAN, the Southeast Asian consumers, differ from Asia Pacific counterparts? Which generations are the most health conscious, and how important are sustainability and social issues in the ASEAN markets? So first off, let's go into retail. Let's have a quick look at frozen fruits. Let me just there we go. And looking at our forecast for growth rates for retail frozen fruit across the 5 main ASEAN markets, we can see that the Philippines are showing the highest growth rates. And the Philippines throughout actually is one of those key players with some of the highest growth rates across all different variations of fruit. But we'll see some other countries showing strong growth rates as well. So what we've got here is the countries listed, as well as the 2022, 3, 4, 5, and 6 compound annual growth rates in millions of kilograms as a percentage. Having a look at this by canned fruit now, and what I've done here is I've just had a look at our brand share data for canned fruit. I've stuck first of all with the Philippines because it's got the highest compound annual growth rates experienced by these major canned fruit distributors. We see that the Philippines is dominated by Del Monte and S&W, as well as Dole. So some big foreign players seem to be dominating the Philippines market. Let's see how that compares with the other markets. Malaysia also dominated by Dole, and we see Del Monte there as well. Those brands pop up throughout the region, but also lots of local brands. We see the growth rates a little bit smaller for Malaysia, but still quite healthy for Del Monte. IAM is a local brand. There's many other local brands as well. You see Pasaraya CS, which is a local supermarket in Malaysia as well, with some strong compound annual growth rates there. Singapore, where I am based and where Angela is based as well, we always think of Singapore as being very brand conscious, but actually for canned fruit, it's dominated by the other sector and the private label. The growth rates for Singapore are much less than the other countries. It's a fairly mature market. Thailand favors the local brands, and we see Dole there with a compound annual growth rate 5.2%. Local player there, Doi Can, with a 9%. But if you look at the graph, you'll see that it's a very small portion of the pie, but also others and private label do dominate in Thailand. And then Indonesia, and we see again a very fragmented market. We see Del Monte as a major player there, but others being a significant contribution to the overall brand share in Indonesia. Okay, let's have a quick look at inflation. I just picked these figures about an hour ago. I extracted these from the GlobalData online price intelligence database from the consumer retail platform. So on the left, what I did is I picked Marigold Peel Fresh, a very popular brand, Cold Storage, a very popular supermarket in Singapore. And this is the price yesterday in Sing dollars, the 7th of February. And this is the price. So we're tracking daily prices going back over 365 days. So you can get a sense about how inflation kicked in from about October last year, 2022. And then I've just done a selection now across all fruit categories on the right side of the screen. So all the juice categories that we're tracking pricing for on the Intelligence Center, to see that over the last 1 year, we've seen a 7.46% increase in pricing. And that compares with 30-day price change. So since the beginning of the year, we've also seen price increases go up by an average of 1.35%. So inflation has been a major factor in the retail sector in Singapore. That's the same also for the food service sector. Obviously, they have to increase their prices as well. Let's have a quick look at the food service sector across ASEAN. And what we see, of course, on the left, we've got 2022, where the 3-year compound annual growth rate was showing a negative because, of course, of the impact of the pandemic and the closure of many food service outlets throughout 2020, 2021, and to an extent 2022 in the region. And we see a big springing back in 2023 in terms of the compound annual growth rates, as we're now going to get more tourism, and particularly what drives the region, has driven the region in the previous decade, was tourism from China, which has been stifled up until literally a couple of weeks ago. But Indonesia and Thailand showing the biggest rebounds now in the food service sector. Looking at the food service sector by fruit types, let me just scan through different fruit types. This is ambient fruit. And again, throughout, we'll see Indonesia and Thailand seeming to be the tall growing poppies there amongst the rest. And we see strong growth rates for 23 and 24. And the markets will then resume in 24, 5 and 6 to have their average growth rates. This is ambient fruits. This is canned fruits. This is for dried fruit. And as Angela said, we'll be sending you this afterwards anyway, so you can see this in a bit more detail. Fresh fruit, frozen fruit, and finally, prepared fruit. Now, staying with the food service sector, I extracted some data from our menu intelligence analytics just last week to look at how important fruit is within all the overall ingredients in the restaurants within the ASEAN region. So on the top is Singapore restaurants. So the answer is it's very strong, a very strong component in all restaurant sectors across all the markets. I'm just showing the variation that we've noticed. This particular slide is showing the penetration across the different types of food service operators in Singapore for fruit, and as a percentage of all of those operators where fruit occurs. So it's a very strong component. If we were live, I could just scroll down here on the Intelligence Center and show you this. We go on for about, we've got like 20 different menu items, but this, you see fruit in the top 3 in Singapore and in Malaysia here, and then in the Philippines on the top here, and let me just move off here. So Indonesia here, and then the other, so Philippines and Vietnam showing here as well. So you can see the relative strength of fruit. It's in the top 3. It's the number 1 for many restaurants, restaurant sectors within Southeast Asia. So a very important part of the food service sector in the region. What I'm going to look at now is our overview of fruit and fruit-based consumption, and look at Southeast Asian or ASEAN preferences for fruit and fruit consumption. The Philippines, consumers in the Philippines are more likely, we found, to buy large quantities of fruit and vegetables. So in light green is high, where people say they buy large portions or buy more frequently, and dark green is where they're buying high-end or premium versions of fresh fruit and vegetables. Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines, the consumers there say, I am actively trying to increase consumption of food and drinks that contain fruit or fruit juices. And when at the bottom there where it says total, that's against the Asia Pacific total. So you can see that most countries in the ASEAN area are more interested in fruit than the Asia Pacific averages. When it comes to the generations, what we found is that the Gen Y, the millennial generation, so these are people born after 1990, between 1990 and, after 1980, between 1980 and 1997. They say they're actively trying to increase their consumption of food and drink that contains fruit and juices. And we found that it was especially females aged 25 to 34 within that generation that said that they were trying to do this. So that's good, because that's a prime working age and where they've got the disposable income. When we asked about describe for spend on juices and squashes, and light green is high, I buy large portions or I buy more frequently. Dark green is I buy high-end or premium versions of these products. We found that the Indonesian consumers in particular say they're likely to favor the premium juice brands, and the Thai and the Vietnam consumers say they're likely to buy larger quantities. And when it came to the generation, it's the Gen Y, but here actually it's the males aged 25 to 34 who say that they like to buy the high-end or premium versions of these products. When it comes to the brands, And notice the difference actually when we're looking at non-alcoholic drinks, including juices, of course, including juices and carbonates and so on. But when we looked at the canned fruit earlier, we saw that there were many local players. Very often the private sector and the other sector were dominating many of the markets in Southeast Asia. But when it comes to beverages, and I put beverages in there because a lot of those beverages will contain fruit, we find that foreign brands seem to be particularly popular. If we compare it to Total, which is Asia Pacific, we can see that most of the ASEAN countries seem to prefer drinks made by foreign brands, followed then by private label. We saw private labels popular with the canned products when we looked at the brand share earlier. By generation, it's Gen X and Gen Y. So Gen X is people born from 1965 to 1980, and Gen Y 1980 to 1997. So the people that are actually dominating the workforce right now that favor the foreign drink brands most when it comes to the non-alcoholic drinks sector, many of which of course contain fruits and juices. Okay, let's have a look now at the fruit flavor preferences. Just got a couple of slides here, 4 slides here to have a look at fruit flavor preferences. For yogurt, actually, we've got this in interactive data form on the intelligence center so that we can have a look by gender, by household income, by diet, by alcohol consumption, and all sorts of different filters and parameters that's fun to play around with. But the question is, which of the following flavors do you choose the most often for yogurt? And you can see here that the berries are popular, strawberry, blueberry. Vanilla is also popular, as is plain unflavored. Strawberry dominates the flavor preferences across the ASEAN countries for yogurt flavor. Let's have a look at some other parameters. Berries, I mentioned, is the most popular flavor for confectionery. So this is for flavor profiles for chocolate, confectionery, and desserts. So we can see berries there in light green, and then citrus, so lemon, grapefruit, and orange in the black color, and then the dark green is fruity colors when it comes to preferences for confectionery. Older generations in particular, so the silent generation, this is the World War II generation, well as the boomer generation, seem to favor berries in chocolate, confectionery, and desserts. And we found particularly females aged 55 to 64 like those in their desserts. I guess they think they're being more healthy by having fruits in their desserts. Let's have a look now at how ASEAN food service consumers compare with Asia Pacific. We looked at inflation earlier when I showed you the price inflation for that fruit juice brand in Singapore over the last 365 days. And we looked at fruit juices in Singapore and we saw that average, it was nearly 8%, I think, inflation. Inflation has hit other parts of the markets in Singapore. It's certainly being talked about a lot here. So there is quite a bit of concern amongst Southeast Asian consumers around inflation. So the question was, how concerned are you with the impact of inflation on my household budget? And we just put this question into our quarterly surveys last year as we started to notice the impact of inflation around the world. Yes, ASEAN does seem to be particularly concerned about that. However, what I found interesting, though, is that the ASEAN consumers, when again we're looking at this through the food service angle, say that they are more likely than those in the rest of the world to frequent, and certainly in Asia Pacific as well. But at the bottom where it says total, that's the rest of the world, and I put China in there as well, so we can just do a comparison China, to frequent a full service restaurant. So we've got daily in light green, dark green a few times a week, and black is once a week. And you can see respondents, particularly from Vietnam and Thailand, say that yes, they're likely to frequent a full service restaurant quite regularly, more regularly than those in the rest of the world, more so than those in Asia Pacific. ASEAN consumers also spending more than the rest of the world on pubs, clubs, and bars specifically. So at the bottom is the overall world, then this Asia Pacific, and you can see most ASEAN consumers spending more, certainly more than the rest of the world are, despite the concerns of inflation. Vietnam and Thai consumers say they are frequenting bars the most often here compared with Asia and compared with the rest of the world. Let's have a quick look at the diner motivations now for different cuisines and parts of the world. When we looked at the question is, which of the following regions do you associate with exciting food and drink flavors? And we've split it by North America, South America, Northern Europe, South Europe and Mediterranean, Middle East, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, and then China. And then the color coding is the percentage of APAC in light green, dark green, Indonesia, and so on. And what we can see from here is that when it comes to South American food and drink flavors, that respondents from the Philippines and the Vietnam claim to be most interested in those. And most ASEAN countries have more interest, it seems, in South American cuisine than Northern Europe cuisine. And I coming from Northern Europe myself, I don't blame them. ASEAN consumers are more likely than those of Asia and the rest of the world to want to try out new flavors. So this is the response to the question. People who completely agree with the question, I like to try out the newest flavors and fragrances as soon as they are available. Unique perhaps to the region, to the Southeast Asia region, a bit more so than the rest of Asia Pacific, is the concept and the culture of street food. So we asked what questions inspire you to try new flavors in food and drink, and respondents who said purchasing food or drink at a market stall, e.g. street food. And you can see that this is much more popular. It's more popular in Asia than the rest of the world, but within Southeast Asia, much more popular. So this is where people are probably going to do a bit of experimentation with different types of cuisine and different flavors. And again, with motivations, health and safety of food is very, very strong motivator, more so than it is for the rest of Asia Pacific. Here, the question actually was, what would be your reasons for trying plant-based alternatives to meat or dairy, and whether it's safety and health. And you can see the ASEAN respondents here indicating very high concerns for health. You can look at it, it's in for Indonesia, it's over 90% indicating, yeah, high concerns for health, and then safety is a strong follow-up there as well. Other areas, other motivations, interestingly enough, ASEAN consumers say that they are more likely to react to social pressures. So we asked them about plant-based alternatives to meat or dairy. So would the motivation of being trendy or peer or social pressure, would that be a motivator for you? And ASEAN-based respondents, most of them, the exception of Singapore, said yes, this is actually an important factor for me. Media, as you can imagine, also has a strong influence on the ASEAN consumers when it comes to trying new flavors. So what they are watching, so that could be, we've put here for cookery shows and celebrity chefs in the dark green color, and in black following podcasts and social media about food. And most ASEAN consumers also like digitally advanced service when they're in restaurants or when they're out shopping elsewhere. And you can see the Philippines consumers are particularly enthusiastic about this. And also ASEAN consumers more interested than the rest of the world in home delivery. Obviously, as with the rest of the world, we experienced a boom in this during the lockdown, and this trend, I think, will seem to continue. You notice that Indonesia, Vietnam are particularly strong with the idea of ordering online, delivered to me, home delivery. The exception actually being Singapore, which is a bit less interested in this than the global respondents at the bottom there. Let's have a look at how concerned ASEAN consumers are with ESG principles. Most of them say they are loyal to brands that support green or environmental matters. And we asked a number of questions here. I've just put a selection up, and we've asked these again recently, and we find there's similar levels of support. If you are, as a brand, claiming to be environmentally, and you've got a strong claim in this, environmentally friendly or concerned for the environment, and you can demonstrate that, you will get a good reception from the ASEAN consumers. And they also claim to be happy to spend a little bit more on that. Whether they do or not is another matter, but they claim to be happy to spend a bit more on brands to support green or environment. This is the, I suppose, this is the only really safe area, I think, for ESG, for brands to put the money in, because some of the other areas of ESG are less, ASEAN respondents a little bit less enthusiastic about them. ASEAN consumers do say they're loyal to brands that support social or human rights matters, more so than the rest of the world, the exception being Singapore, which doesn't seem to be particularly phased by this. And ASEAN consumers do say they'll buy more for products from a brand if it aligns with my personal beliefs or values, more so than where it says total at the bottom. That's global. And what we found for this is particularly females aged 25 to 34 seem to be particularly interested in this. And also some ASEAN consumers will say that they will boycott brands that don't align with their values. And I think to play safe here, I would suggest go for the environmental, go for the climate concern values. Don't necessarily go for all the sort of values that are proving popular, particularly in North America and Western Europe, as there can be some contention amongst ASEAN consumers. Okay, so the key findings. ASEAN countries often favour foreign brands, especially the younger generations, and yet we've seen that local brands are dominating canned fruit for many, but not all of those countries. Philippines consumers, generally the most health conscious in Asia, seem to be consuming a lot in the fruit sector, more growth rates there, and more so than the APAC average. ASEAN countries spending more than Asia Pacific on eating and drinking out, despite concerns around inflation in the region. Younger generations tend to be more health conscious than the older generations, except older generations more likely to avoid sugar, perhaps for some vitamins. Philippines, highest growth rates for retail fruit consumption, and for we saw actually the growth rate for the brands, all the brands there showing high growth rates in the Philippines. ASEAN consumers claim to be motivated by sustainability and social causes, but it does depend on the cause. Okay, I've done a quick whip through there. That's about 50 something slides there. I appreciate I was going a little bit fast just to try and keep it within the time frame. Do please let me know if there are any Q&A. I don't know if I see from an anonymous attendee a question here. What are the main challenges a Latin American fruit seller will face when entering the ASEAN market? Difficult for me to perhaps say for a Latin American fruit seller challenges when facing the ASEAN market, because I think our expertise is more about showing what is the market size and the market potential. And I haven't really spoken to enough Latin American fruit sellers to understand the challenges that they were facing. But I guess probably the main thing that you could take away from this, when we looked at the brand share and we looked at the preferences, we saw some similarities, but when it came to brand share, we saw just how different the ASEAN markets were. So we saw some countries were strong on the big famous foreign brands, and other countries were favoring their local brands and the other players as well. So I would just caution you to be conscious of the fact that the ASEAN markets are culturally, they're very, very different. Obviously, the languages are different. The GDP rates are very, very different. You've got Singapore at one extreme, which is one of the most affluent countries, highest proportion of millionaires, I think, in the world. And then you've got the other extreme. We've got countries which we didn't cover, like Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, where there are much higher levels of poverty and much different markets. So just be conscious of the fact that there is no one size fits all for ASEAN markets, that they are very, very different, very culturally different in terms of GDP and economies and so on. Thank you for that. Any other questions which people want to shout out or put in the chat box?
Well, I think we don't have any more questions. Thank you very much for this. For those who might be interested in more about the fruits, we have some webinars done in the past where we share more about the challenges actually and how to enter into this market. That would be interesting to review in our YouTube channel. And thank you very much, and have a very good day and a very good evening for those in Latin America. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.